check out everything. And while the band was in the UK, I guess at some point Bob had decided to leave the band. We do talk about it a little bit in the documentary. And they came home, and I was sort of like on the stoop with my bags and my drum set, and I was invited to join the band at that point. So it was sort of a unbelievable moment of, I didn't expect that to happen.
So pretty quickly, you started coming over to tour with them in the UK.
Real soon, yeah. I think within a matter of months, we were over here touring, and playing shows, supporting the record that had just come out, which was Bad Moon Rising.
And then you proceeded to write with the band and be involved in the kind of composing and arranging of songs on both Evol and then Sister.
Sure, yes.
If we could talk about what it was like to start writing the longer kind of intros and outros work that became Daydream Nation after those two records.
Yeah, we touch on this a bit, and I'm not sure exactly why it happened, but I think just after all this work that we'd done together with making Evol and making Sister, the band was in a really good groove, and it was time to make this record that became Daydream Nation, and we were writing and just really relaxed with each other, and we'd done a lot of playing together, and this album started to have these longer songs. And I think also improvising was becoming a new thing to the band, and that was affecting the length of these songs. But in the end, these songs wound up being like 5, 6, 7 minutes long, and like you say, most of them have like an intro that kind of spaces out for a while, and then an outro, and it was just how the four of us were writing at that time, and I think it was because we had been playing so much together that happened, and also I think there was a sort of concentrated effort to make the recording have some of the energy that we had live, because our live shows were really great at that time, but we always felt the recordings themselves could be better, and so I think that was one aspect of trying to get our act across on vinyl.
I think that you made a huge difference to the. I mean, I know the way of recording was different. I know Thurston had written a whole slew of kind of songs as well. So it was always going to probably be a larger length album, wasn't it? Did it always feel that way, that it was going to be a double album right from the get-go?
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure of that. I think at a certain point we realized, oh, there's 12 songs, but they're really long, and I think at that point we realized it would be a double, and that's when we started sort of making fun of ourselves with the artwork of the record and titling,
full symbols.
Yeah, the symbols, a la Led Zeppelin, and putting a trilogy on a double album. We thought, like, well, you have to have a trilogy, and so we thought it was a little far-fetched to make a double album. Bands of our type weren't really making statements like that, except for Zen Arcade by Husker Du and Double Nickels on the Dime by the Minutemen, which were two really big records for us.
Was there a sense of actually trying to outdo those albums, or was it just yours was a double, theirs had been a double?
Well, yeah, I think in the indie world, it was more expensive, and so like, well, it's going to cost you more, and you're not going to make as much money per record, and that sort of thing. But we were a very stubborn bunch, and so when we decided, no, these 12 songs go together, then there wasn't really a way to talk us out of it. So it became a double, obviously.
Right on. There was an interesting thing that someone pointed out at a screening in, I think it was Edinburgh, about the strength of the visual work that went along with the band. And I know that I've seen photographs of Kim Gordon laying out artwork for the cover. If you could talk about Kim's background and how she put together some of these record cover images.
I'm not so versed to speak about Kim's background, but she was primarily an arts student first, and she came across country, I believe, with Mike Kelly. They drove across cross country, and maybe they wound up in Toronto for a while before they were in New York City. But Kim was often the person who, when we were finishing an album, she would have a mock-up of, how we used to mock up albums in the old days, like cardboard and pasting, the images there. And so Kim was often taking the lead on that sort of thing. And definitely with Daydream Nation, she was friends with Gerhard Richter and Gerhard's partner at the time. And I think that Kim's relationship with Gerhard was the reason that the band was able to use the painting for no charge at all. So it was quite a thing to be able to have a Gerhard, well, two Richters on the cover of this album, a pretty low budget indie album at the time.
The person who kind of helped to release Daydream Nation, Paul, if you could talk about what it was like working with sort of a UK-based team to put out the record, and if that added or changed anything.
Well, the band started working with Paul just before I joined. So Paul came in and saved the band in 84, 85 with starting a new label exclusively or not exclusively, but initially to put out Sonic Youth records. And so Paul put out Bad Moon Rising, and it really changed everything for the group. And the band started coming over here more often. The last bit of the Bob Burt years, and then when I joined, of course, we kept coming over, and this label, Blast First, was a part of Mute Records. It was sort of like a subsidiary of Mute. And so we would go to the Mute offices when we'd come to London, and maybe members of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds are in the office, or or other Mute artists, and it was kind of mind-blowing, especially from my background, coming from a smaller town in Michigan, and these were people that I really admired a great deal. And also, in those days, Rough Trade was distributing our records, and so we would often go to Rough Trade, and that was just a really big deal for for being fans of independent records.
I know that Liverpool is a city that's loomed large in your musical imagination and things that you were curious about. And then, Steve, I know that you were in Manchester in your youth. Like, what drew both of you to Liverpool, and what do you get out of the city?
You see all these faces looking at me now saying, say something nice about you Manchester Skull. I've been coming to Liverpool since I was in my teens, partly for gigs, partly because I'd exhausted all the record shops in Manchester, and I wanted to come to like Probe and buy records. I was coming to Eric's. It's always been a city that I've really liked because it's navigable. It's a very honest kind of city, and the music that came from here, aside from Buzzcocks, Ludus, Certain Ratio, and Joy Division, and 10cc, I could probably take or leave any Manchester, not the full, take and leave any Manchester band, whether it's the Stone Roses or Oasis or whatever. I've always just preferred bands like Wahheat, Beatles, even Jerry Marsden, or whatever. And I know Steve and I, one of the things that we always talk about when we're here is which Beatles site we're going to go see. Can we go and stand somewhere that sort of John stood? Do you think George dropped that? It's still there. It's an exciting city, and it's not in terms of its character and in terms of the. Despite Liverpool one, despite all the changes, it's still very much recognisably the city that I knew in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's not fundamentally changed in terms of its character, and I really like that too. There's a certain directness, and you see it in the bands like Clinic and other bands like that. They do their thing. The Pale Fountains do their thing, and in many ways it's like New York in that it exists within itself, and it's going to inform itself, and it's going to just carry on regardless of whatever the tropes or fashions are. It's going to do what it wants to do, and that's really willfully independent, and it's great, I think.
I have a great fondness for the city. It's so easy to visit, and I love walking around, and of course I'm crazy about all the musical history, we do always kind of walk somewhere where something happened 50 years ago or 40 years ago, and it's just it's great for the imagination just to be here, and it's so enjoyable. So it's a friendly place. I just always have a good time.
Right on. One of the things that interested me was that Sonic Youth seemed to go out of their way to bring interesting bands to open up and perform with them, and that you would end up bringing a band like Mudhoney or Nirvana or Dinosaur.
Fire hose.
Fire hose,
yeah.
As someone that was attending concerts at that time, did you pick up on that or notice that? Was it exciting that you would make time to be there early for whatever was going on for the 2 acts before Sonic Youth?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, yes, because it was you wanted to see what that Sonic Youth as a band were interested in, and they always had great choices of acts. We just named 3 just now. There was a generosity of who you bring out on the road with you. I mean, some of the Clash always did, whether it was Lee Dorsey or Bo Diddley or Grandmaster Flash or the Slits or Richard Hell, and it's what every band that are truly committed to spreading a message should be doing. They should be using their platform in all sorts of ways for filmmakers, for artists, and things. Bands like the Sonic Youth always did. And I guess that was a direct part of who you were as a band and who you are as a band.
I think Lance and I have talked about this a bit as we've been traveling, and definitely that's all true. I mean, you wanted to give a platform to someone you thought was great, but there was also like a little bit of selfishness that we just really wanted to have a fun night. And if someone was really great and you could watch Mudhoney or Nirvana before you went on, you just knew you were going to have a great time and it was going to help your set. And so even though it works out for everyone, we invited a lot of those bands just because we would have more fun while you're traveling around.
Wonderful. I was going to see if there's any questions that people in the audience had, and then we'll kind of talk and set up this next chunk of footage after that. Does anyone here have anything that they'd like to ask, either Steve, or myself? Yes.
When you recorded Teenage Riot, were you like trying to deliberately write a pop song? Because it's like one of the few songs of that time when you've got like a verse and a chorus, isn't it? It's like quite traditional pop song.
Yeah. No, I mean that song was also, there were so many verses, so I think it was never that poppy. It was just the 4 of us putting something together. But no, it's funny, we get asked those type of questions through the years, and we never really discussed that stuff. It was more about like, hey, you do this and I'll do that, and you were trying to like almost sculpt something, or like kind of close to architecture. You're building this song thing, and that's what was really going on. We never said like, oh, let's tone this one down 10% and make it a little bit poppier, and it just wasn't part of our plan. It was hard enough to please four really different people. That was kind of the biggest part of it.
Right on. Anyone else? Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned about taking bands on the road
Mm-hmm.
and working with bands. You were just slightly older than most of the bands we played.
Me, yes.
Yeah, and Sonic Youth was slightly older. And was there the sense that you were slight elder statesmen? You were taking these bands under your wing a little bit?
Not so much. I mean,
It felt like that to the rest of us.
Elder statesman? I don't know. I mean, again, it's like, do we make this song poppier? It's like, we didn't really talk like that.
There was a sense from outside of the band that you, as a band, knew things that, the dynamic of Kim and Thurston feeling like this kind of like smart, savvy, good taste, almost parental figure to a lot of, the sort of bands that he mentioned that were a few years younger, that that it felt like you'd been the pioneers or trailblazers that had gone out in 1984, 85, 86 and learned where you could play in the UK, so that bands like Dinosaur or Pavement or Nirvana could then go to those venues and play 3 years later, and that it sort of built up a circuit of knowledge. And similarly, like when you guys would do fanzine interviews or find a filmmaker like Richard Kern or Dave Markey to work with, that other bands would see, okay, we can make a video that isn't just a normal lip sync video. We can do something cool with someone like Dave Markey. I think there's a lot that was sort of picked up on by bands that are maybe 3 to 4 years younger than you guys were. That did feel like you were semi-smart, informed, friendly, parental, older brother, older sister type of figures.
We were really big fans of that stuff too. It was a lot of enthusiasm. So
you were a walk. I mean, you know the back cover of Buffalo Springfield again, where it has the list of all the different kind of musicians that they really dig, you know, they really like. And you get that album for the first time, you recognize like the Monkees and maybe Cass Elliot and a few names, and then you're looking at other names and thinking, I don't know who Sandy Bull is, I don't know who this guy is, I don't know who that is. But it was like an endorsement. These are kind of cool, interesting names, and you should be checking these people out. And I think you did that right through being Sonic Youth the whole time. There was always somebody endorsing someone and talking about someone. You're a walking Buffalo Springfield second album.
well, that's true to a degree, but we didn't always like the opening band. You know, some nights you'd have some line, you're like, who is this? We're never going to ask them again. You know, so I understand. I see what you guys are saying.
And not to put your band down, but like when I was talking to Steve about this the other night, like I can't name you who the Pixies had open up on any tour that I saw. It's not like they curated and cultivated. You've got to get there early to see whatever. You know, I don't know who Soul Asylum had open up for them, but I know that I would see great performers. You know, usually 2 opening acts each time, and in later years, sometimes one would be like a challenging noise piece, and then another would be someone that was working with guitars. You know, it sort of grew over the years, but it was always worth going a bit early and seeing what Sonic Youth were about to share with the audience.
Well, it was always important that we be involved with the booking of the openers and who we were traveling with. So it was a big deal.
What did you get out of seeing the band live? Like, what as a audience member did you experience during this time period?
Well, I think there was I saw the early shows before Steve. I saw, and then the sister tour, and there was a definite move. I mean, you mentioned before, like Teenage Riot being a popular song. I think it was one of the things you noticed from the very early shows to like Daydream Nation was that there was more of a control of the dissonance and of the noise. Like it was serving the song rather than being there. I mean, Teenage Riot is so quick as a song. If you slow it down, you can hear all these kind of chimes that are serving a purpose. They'd be melodic on a slower song. It's almost like the Beach Boys, but super quick and noisier. And as an audience member, there's a quote from Mike Kelly who says that something like the fields of noise that Sonic Youth had. And with most bands, you've got this, like you mentioned Throbbing Gristle, with most of these bands, you've got this huge field of noise that's just there to be brutal and punishing. With Sonic Youth, there was a sense you could penetrate that noise. You could pull out kind of ideas and melodies that were happening within it. And as an audience member, that was something really, really interesting compared to what was going on. As I said before, at the same time, everybody seemed to be going backwards, to be going forwards. They weren't quite as controlled and new as Sonic Youth were. And it really was something that I remember being way down the front and just these fields of noise, but it wasn't just noise. It had a purpose. It's a bit like the kind of like Sister Ray. It always keeps you interested. There's never a moment when you get bored with Sister Ray. It's always intriguing. And I think, I noticed that from those early shows, and not knocking Bob, I like Bob and I know you do, but I think in many ways that you allowed the band to be able to go in so many different directions because you're a more percussive drummer. You're a more interesting drummer. That's not knocking Bob's ability, But you being there suddenly made almost like Daydream Nation feel like a debut album again, because everything suddenly became focused and tighter and
I was more of a Beatles fan than Bob was.
yeah. Is that true? You like the Beatles?
Yes, it is.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. We have a full batch of footage to show you now of the band playing the record Daydream Nation live. It was recorded in Glasgow in Scotland in 2007. Steve, if you could kind of talk to us about how the band was approached to do these performances and how this came together.
Back in 2007, we had played a lot of shows for ATP, All Tomorrow's Parties, and at this time they were doing an offshoot called Don't Look Back, where actually bands would look back and play one of their key albums. Like I think they even got Public Enemy to do It Takes a Nation, and all kinds of people did all kinds of records. They invited us to do Daydream Nation, and we turned them down several times, and the months would go by, and they'd come back with a new offer, and they'd really want us to play Daydream Nation. It got to the point where I think we were working on our own album or our new album at the time, Rather Ripped, and it just wasn't interesting to us at that time. So finally they asked us, and we said yes, and we had to go and relearn some of these songs that we hadn't played in 2007. It was almost 20 years. Not all the songs, but some of the songs we hadn't played in a long time. And so we actually had to remix the record where we put Lee's guitars on the left channel and then everybody else on the right side, so Lee could listen and kind of learn his parts. And then we did the same thing for Thurston with the opposite channel. And eventually we did this tour, which was like 20 or 30 dates, I think, mostly playing outdoor venues like festivals like Primavera in Spain or Pitchfork in Chicago. And this particular night that we have the film of, we were playing indoors at a ABC theater in Glasgow. And Lance was there the night before our concert filming Slint, who were also doing Spiderland at that time. And I happened to go to the show and run into Lance and just kind of casually like, hey, we're playing Daydream tomorrow. Like maybe he'd want to stay and film. And Lance put together a film crew at the last minute and filmed this footage that we're about to see, which came out really nicely. It's multi-track recorded by Aaron Mullen, who Lance has mentioned earlier tonight. And anything else, Lance, you want to?
No, I think that makes sense. So it was a great show in a great indoor venue. There was a fire at the art school next door that spread and sort of damaged this venue, and so recently,
Yeah.
and so it looks like it's no longer going to survive. The roof basically had major damage. So it's great to see this film from about 10 years ago, on this would have been around the 20th anniversary of Daydream Nation. It sort of captures the band playing the record in its entirety. We're going to show all the highlight songs in this section that's about to begin now. And we thank everyone for coming out. We thank FACT for putting on this event. Steve and I will be outside. We have some asking other questions we didn't get to in here. And I'd like to thank Steve and Steve for setting this thing up. And enjoy Daydream Nation Live, and we'll see you afterwards. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, sorry.